Great. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Kari Jordahl. I'm with University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are talking to you today, about, actually, I'm going to pause for a second because we grabbed the wrong slide deck accidentally. So can we just put it on pause for 1 second while we,
Yep.
Are we good?
There we go. Yep.
All right. Thank you all for your patience. And we're happy to have you here with us today. We are at the University of Madison, University of Wisconsin in Madison. UW has been around for 175 years. So this is a picture of Bascom Hall with some 175-year-old recognition, our 175 banners. That's not important today. We're really excited to be here with you all. And thanks for your patience and while we got set up. My name is Kari Jordahl. I'm with the Learning Analytics Center of Excellence, and I'm here with some fabulous colleagues. They're going to talk to you about their projects that we did over the course of this academic year. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves as we move along. They're going to tell you about the questions they asked, the type of data they collected, and then some of the findings that they came up with, and then some of the either plans for next steps or some of the actions they've already taken. So you'll hear from them mostly. I do want to give you a little bit of an overview about this program. Our colleague Sid Freitag presented earlier today on a lightning talk. She gave a bigger talk about the microgrant program. But basically it's providing seed money for instructors, instructional staff to explore some different types of questions. So they will each have some time to talk about their projects, and at the end we really want to have a discussion, and we want you to think about the types of data that you'd be interested in, and what kind of data might provide insights for you in support of inclusive teaching and supporting student success. So we will have time at the end for discussion. If you have questions along the way, please post them in the chat. I think we'll address questions. We'll have a discussion at the end, so we won't stop between sessions. We want to make sure our presenters all have time to share about their projects. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of our program, the goal was really to encourage innovation and the proactive and intentional use of DEIB principles in this work, and a foundational goal was really to expand and grow capacity for us to use data, teaching and learning data. So it's really about that data literacy and using data. The other key component of it is that these are very much action research projects. So the focus is on taking action or planning to take action. So these are, maybe smaller projects and questions, thinking about how can we make some incremental changes to a course design or a teaching practice. So these are our kind of primary goals. And just a little bit more about our program. This is still a pilot program. We just finished our second year. We've started gearing up for the 24 and 25 academic year, which will really begin fully in fall. Proposals were asked to they had to just answer questions. How might you use data to support diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging in your teaching practice or for program improvement? So once they submitted a proposal and it was accepted, they were provided with support throughout the academic year, which included a stipend and then a lot of project support. So whether it was around data governance or collecting and analyzing data or pedagogical consulting, some consulting around evaluation and surveys. So that was also, I think, as important as the stipend. And then the other key part of the program is that we did monthly cohort meetings so that they could collaborate with peers from across the institution and really connect and talk about their projects. This is a cross-divisional project, so it's not just one division that's doing it. And again, as I just mentioned, I'm from LACE, our Learning Analytics Center of Excellence. So we're part of DO-IT, the Division of IT. And then we also collaborated closely with our Division for Teaching and Learning. I'm not going to talk through this timeline, but I just want to mention that it's very much a process. So, just like every academic year, you have the cycle of the year. So we work throughout the year to get these projects going, starting with identifying a question, and then working on data governance, meeting as a learning community, gathering and analyzing data, and then planning to take action. So this kind of gives you a little bit of the flow of how we have worked through this academic year. And it's been really exciting to see some of the impacts. So the first year we had 4 projects across 3 schools and colleges and about 1,500 students that were impacted. This year we were able to grow. We had 5 projects. We had more awardees across 4 schools and colleges and about 3,000 students. And it's just kind of fun, at least for me, to do the math and to see, just to see how the numbers add up. But of course, it's not really about the numbers. It's about how are we really impacting students, right? And so as the collaborations continue, we're seeing how it kind of is a ripple effect. So something that might have started out as a course level project is expanding across that program. And we're seeing interdepartmental collaborations across both years of the cohort. So it's really fun to see that back and forth conversation and collaboration. And we're also seeing program level projects that are happening across schools and colleges. So the small seed money and these small kind of more finite defined projects really have taken on kind of a life of their own and have grown. These are some of the things that we have seen and heard from our participants. I'm not going to read these to you. Just highlight that team teaching expands the outreach. Just even asking students about belonging lets them know that their instructor cares. And then again, just more about how the sharing, how it keeps broadening. So we had 5 projects last year, 23, 24. Out of the 5 projects, we have 4 of them that are being represented today that are going to be talking to you. And I'm going to hand it off to our College of Agricultural and Life Sciences colleagues. And we're just going to kind of play musical chairs. So I'm going to hop out and they're going to hop in. Thanks.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Liza Chang. I use she, her pronouns. I am the first year program manager within the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences at the UW-Madison campus.
And I'm Diana Frantz Anderson. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm the academic planner in CALS.
So we'd like to share a little bit with you all today about specifically looking at the first year landscape within our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, or we'll shorten that to CALS for our presentation here today. So a little bit about CALS in the first year seminar. Within our college, we actually have a requirement for all of our incoming first year students to take a first year seminar because there has been lots of prior research done where first year seminars have been an established tool for supporting students in that transition from high school to college. Lots of research done has shown that this really sets students up for success, for feeling a sense of belonging within their college or university. And we have within our college many courses that fulfill this first year seminar requirement. So we have things from major specific seminars to seminars that are more exploratory, seminars that live within residential learning communities, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll talk a little bit today about some of those first year seminars within our college, but also focusing in on one specific one that I teach. A little bit more about that. So specifically for our project, we wanted to use a data-centered approach to understand particularly how effective are CALS first year seminar courses and how can we improve them moving forward. For our project, we really wanted to focus on first generation students. We'll talk about why in just a second. But we had 2 sort of goals of our project, which we'll call 2 different arms. The first arm, we really focused on institutional data. So across all of the first year seminars that our college offers, looking back for the last 3 years, how have students been doing in terms of retention and academic actions or probation? The second arm of our project has looked specifically, like I said, on a specific first year seminar that I teach. I'll talk more about that in a second, but specifically looking at student belonging within that course.
I'm going to talk a little bit about why we chose first-gen students as our area of focus. We chose to focus on first-gen students because of the well-documented differences in outcomes between first-gen and continuing gen students in the research literature. We know that first-gen students are less likely to finish an undergraduate degree they start, finish within 4 years, avoid academic probation, and then report that they feel like they belong on a college campus. So for our project, we specifically looked at students who had enrolled in one of our College of Agricultural and Life Sciences first-year seminars. And like Liza said, there are different types of first-year seminars. We focused in on students that had declared within a CALS degree in those courses. And there were 396 first-gen students, 1,706 continuing gen students. And we looked at the last 3 years of institutional data from those first-year seminars. So we were looking at patterns in retention, academic action, so that means probation, and then generation status, we called it, so first-gen or continuing gen status. So the findings that I'm going to show you right now are very preliminary, and we're continuing to work on our project and dig deeper into the data and make different comparisons. But one of our first findings was that students who have taken a first-year seminar in CALS are more likely to leave our college for another college if they receive a probation action. So this could be a result of them finding their path, but it's something that we need to know more about. And our second preliminary finding that I'd like to talk about is around first-gen status and probation actions. So first-gen students are more likely to experience a probation action. The data have pointed us in a direction that we need to go to understand more about how to support first-gen students and all students who experience a probation action.
So as Diana said, we are working more to dig deeper into that data. So we're excited to continue working on that across our college. I want to talk a little bit about our second arm here, where we focused on one specific first-year seminar within CALS. This is a course that encompasses students from many different majors within our college. It's sort of an exploratory first-year seminar, and really talking about really talking about how to transition to college, thinking about the different resources that are available to them, and finding a community. So what we did within this course is we specifically wanted to know more about student belonging and what that meant to students and how they felt in terms of their belonging within the course, the college, and our university. So we administered a survey to students last fall. And I do want to point out within this survey, I'll show you some of the data to break down what we asked them. But I do want to point out that for the purposes of what data we have here, we did only have 5 out of 46 students who responded identify as first generation. And so just to note that our N was a smaller sample size for this semester, but we hope to administer this survey again in this class in future semesters, but also across other CALS first year seminars. So a couple findings that have jumped out to us so far from the data is that our first-gen students within this specific first-year seminar have reported feeling less of a part of the UW-Madison community compared to their continuing gen peers. So we didn't see this difference when we asked them whether they felt a part of the classroom community or the CALS community, but we did see a larger and significant difference between folks who are first-gen and continuing gen when we asked about the UW-Madison community. The other piece that I want to point out is that when we asked about specific topics covered within our first year seminar, including things like growth mindset and academic success, imposter syndrome, things like that, our first year seminar students particularly reported that these types of discussions were more important to their sense of belonging at UW-Madison versus continuing generation students. We also saw that our first-gen students reported that having peer leaders in this first-year seminar was more important to their sense of belonging within the classroom as well. So one thing I just want to point out in general about these findings is that a lot of the things that seem to be supporting students within our first year seminar are really around unpacking the hidden curriculum, helping students to see themselves and how they fit into the college and as a college student in general. So to sort of conclude, we're definitely working more on this project, and we are really looking forward to collecting more data and looking deeper into that data. And one thing that we would really like to do is be able to share our findings across our CALS partners. So we have many academic staff, we have advisors, we have other first-year seminar instructors within the college that we'd like to be able to talk about this data with. And particularly for the future, think about how we might update our requirements for what courses count as first-year seminars. And in the end, really our goal here is to improve our student success and equitable experiences within our CALS first-year seminars. And with that, I think we will pass it on to our next presenters. I believe we are taking questions for all of our projects at the very end.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Kari, could you advance to the next slide?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Porter. I'm an associate professor at the School of Pharmacy here at UW-Madison, and I'll be joined by Amanda Margolis, who is also an associate professor here. We're both in the Pharmacy Practice and Translational Research Division. And I'm going to be starting off our presentation today talking about student recognition of pharmacist care to support medically underserved populations following an introductory pharmacy practice experience, and sharing more about our project. Next slide, please. So first of all, here at UW-Madison, the Doctor of Pharmacy in the School of Pharmacy is a 4-year program. The degree is called the PharmD degree. And we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion thread that spans throughout our entire experiential education curriculum. In the first 3 years, students complete introductory pharmacy practice experiences, what we term IPPEs, where they spend time at pharmacy sites to learn more about pharmacy practice settings and the roles that pharmacists undertake. At our institution, students need to complete at least one IPPE with what we call medically underserved IPPE. And we have defined that as at least 20% of patients are from a medically underserved population per the HHS definition, which is located on the lower right-hand side of this slide. However, we don't know if these experiences at a medically underserved IPPE translate into meaningful learning about medically underserved patients. And so that's where our project really delved into to find out more information. Next slide. Oops. So our project objective was to determine a first-year student recognition of medically underserved populations and ways to mitigate the gaps in care while at community pharmacy sites. And I've actually included some pictures from our sites here that we have. On the left-hand side are some of our students at a site in Alaska. And then on the right-hand side are 2 pharmacists, which are former graduates at the Ho-Chunk House of Wellness in Baraboo, Wisconsin, which is about an hour away from Madison. Next slide, please. So what we did is our first-year students completed a 40-hour community pharmacy experience. And then after that, they submitted a reflection. The reflection question is on the right-hand side here. It says, describe an experience and or discussion with your preceptor related to a medically underserved population that had an impact on you and why. What we did then is for all of our reflections, we did content analysis. We had 3 different investigators who used to code themes. 24.4% of those were coded in duplicate to make sure we had inter-rater reliability. And we had 2 years of data. So we used both spring of 2023 and spring of 2024 courses in order to get our results, which go to the next slide. So we had 192 students who were enrolled in the courses over those 2 years. 44.5% of students reflected on something that they directly observed, and this was compared versus a discussion with their preceptor. About 2.1%, only 4 students had reflections that had more of a negative tone or word. So what they said they dealt with, for an example, on how that would come across. On the right-hand side, though, you can see that almost 3/4 of our patients, or students, I should say, 72.9% of our students identified one or more specifically medically underserved populations per our definition. Now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to provide more of our results.
Thanks, Andrea. Amanda Margolis. I'm also faculty with the UW-Madison School of Pharmacy. and also in the Pharmacy Practice Translational Research Division. So in addition to looking at some of the initial, like, did they identify populations and whatnot, we also looked at what were the themes in those reflections? What did they take away from the experience? And what we found was our students were able to identify not only the populations, but what were the barriers, what were the limitations that they observed among those patients who came from a medically underserved population. So the 4 barriers that they identified most frequently were lower socioeconomic status, which leads to, limited resource availability, patients with physical disabilities, again, leading to limitations in often communication, non-English speaking, again, limitations in communication, and then rurality, which again gets at another access issue. Now, I will just throw out, you'll see that there are other barriers to care that students identified. I will also be overt and say that not all students were able to identify a barrier to care. We'll go to the next slide. We also looked at, in addition to what were those limitations, we had a lot of students reflecting on, as a pharmacist, what can they do to help mitigate those barriers to care? What did they see their site and their preceptor, their clinical instructor doing that then they can emulate or learn from to be a more caring pharmacist or have more culturally appropriate care going forward? A lot of those, again, understandably revolved around access to medications and other healthcare services. And then, again, understanding medication. So what were those things that they could do to overcome those communication barriers? Go to the next slide. Our big takeaway is that even though these are first-year students, they're in their first year of the curriculum, they haven't had a ton of their content, they were able to learn about medically underserved patients on their community pharmacy rotations. Not all students, like we talked about, reflected on a specifically medically underserved population, but many of them did. So again, we're setting that good foundation to begin with. We know that early reflection can set that foundation. So as they learn about things later in the curriculum, like social determinants of health, they can think back to those experiences that they actually saw for themselves and make those impactful connections as they go forward. If you learn something from a patient in the experiential setting, especially if it was, I don't want to say a mistake because we filter our students pretty closely, you never forget it. We'll also say another positive thing we found was that most of our patients had really positive or neutral tones to their wording. There weren't many of those examples where there were more of the negative tone in their words, so in their reflections. If you go to the next slide. So while we've made it through that initial set of content analysis, we have some additional more quantitative exploration within that data set. We want to know, was there a difference in identification of patients or robustness of observations and reflections on if they actually interacted with patients versus if they spoke with their preceptor? We're wondering if specific barriers they observed led to specific learning about the pharmacist's role. And we've also tracked what types of populations and proportions of medically underserved populations are at different sites. So we're wondering, does the number of patients in those categories influence their ability to identify and have strong reflections on them? If you go to our next slide, we have our last slide here. Some future ideas we have are to reflect on those prompts to make it clearer for students. We're also thinking about, is there preceptor development or those clinical instructors, those pharmacists in the field that we can help to support so that they can be better clinical teachers in this area? And then lastly, other curriculum revisions or ordering of content or whatnot that we can do before they start this rotation so they can get even more out of those experiences and observations. So, and that's what we had. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, for your continued attention. I am Christa Wille. I am from the College of Engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I both teach and help support instructors within our college as well. So I'd also like to acknowledge Kate Fu, a professor in engineering who has helped with this project and along the way. So in the College of Engineering, we know teamwork's important. We teach our students how to build cars. We teach our students literally how to build rocket ships, but we never teach teamwork, even though we fully expect students to be a part of a team. So in the College of Engineering, we've taken on a college-wide initiative to really put some additional time and effort to helping our students with important professional skills such as teamwork. In addition, through different climate college surveys that we've done, we know belonging has some challenges amongst our students, and we know this is important. So our thought is that if we can improve and start to implement some teamwork specific skills and curricular requirements, then we may also see some link between teamwork and belonging amongst our students. So the purpose of this research analysis or this project that I'm talking about today was really to understand if there is an association between effective team dynamics and an individual sense of belonging in our engineering students specifically. And we use students within team-based design courses. So the intent was to work with students in an already team-based setting. And we did bring some initial pilot stage of initial teamwork specific curriculum to these design team students, both at the freshman and senior capstone level. So a couple different touch points. And our intent was to gather feedback through self-reported surveys, both on teamwork and belonging, and additionally looking for feedback on the specific curriculum that we brought to these students as well. And what I ended up doing is take an average. I'll show you in just a second the teamwork specific questions and the belonging specific questions in this survey. But we took an index measure of the questions that we identified as teamwork specific questions and an index or an average of those questions that we set as belonging questions. And then we ultimately explored the association between the teamwork index and sense of belonging index that we calculated from these surveys. So here's an example of the survey questions that we gave to students. Each question was assessed on a scale, a Likert scale, 1 to 5. How strongly do you agree or disagree? And I'll also point out that students weren't given the survey in such a way that clearly flagged these questions as teamwork specific or belonging specific questions. It was designed in different, essentially randomly distributed blocks of questions that students saw. So moving to some results of this survey, we had almost 400 students that answered the survey that were given these initial touch points of teamwork specific curricular implementation and completed our survey with relatively high between somewhat agree and strongly agree average measures of teamwork and belonging. And we looked at several different demographics within this population, but the delineation or the grouping that I'll talk about today is just self-reported gender status, and look at the differences between those that identified as man and those that identified as women. So you can see when we look at the correlation to really try to determine the association between these belonging and teamwork, effective team dynamics, there's overall a really strong correlation with upwards of about 0.7. A subtle difference between those who self-reported as man versus those who reported as women, with a slightly lower correlation you can see in the women. What's interesting here is that while we're pleased to see that most of our students, there are all nearly 400 students represented on this scatter plot, and while most of those students lie in that upper right quadrant with a high sense of teamwork and belonging, there's certainly a handful that are in that very lower left quadrant that have a low sense of teamwork and low sense of belonging. And we're still in the works of analysis and moving forward with the next steps of this project. But one thing that's interesting is any instructors in the room will certainly agree, I'm sure, that handful, even though that might just be 5 or 6 individuals, 5 or 6 students in that lower left quadrant, take an incredible amount of time and resources for the instructors. So if we can continue to work to identify and analyze why or what's happening with those handful of students in the lower left corner, and what can we do, how can we tailor and target our curricular improvements and implementation, maybe we can continue to see improvement across the board with some of our students as well. So in conclusion, there certainly is a link between teamwork and belonging. And going into this, that was absolutely our hypothesis. You know, personally, it seems that the teams that I've been on that have effective team dynamics certainly do have a stronger sense of belonging. But we wanted to show that within our engineering students as well. And like I said, we're starting to look at different correlations and try to understand how or where some of our different student demographics or populations may be or how they may differ on these correlations. We've also got additional data and we're working to collect additional data across more semesters so that we can start to tease into that handful that might be in that lower quadrant to try to understand more about who or why students might be challenged with both teamwork and belonging. So moving forward, we're like I mentioned, hoping to continue to add and analyze additional data from more recent cohorts. We're looking at pre-post semester, pre-post implementation, and trying to also compare. I mentioned we've got students from freshman design courses and also senior capstone design courses. So trying to dive into that a little bit more in a higher level detail and apply some advanced statistical analyses. And as I mentioned, some different subgroup analyses. And then finally, also, like I mentioned, really try to explore the impact of the students and number of students and where they lie on these correlations and belonging to not only improve student learning, but also to help instructors and teachers to improve the efficiency and efficacy of the teaching strategies that we're using as well. So thank you for your attention. I will turn it over now to Sarah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Zurawski. I'm a clinical assistant professor in our occupational therapy department here at UW-Madison. And my project is titled Developing an OT Occupational Therapy Professional Identity in Divisive Political Landscapes. So for the last 10 years, I have taught the first year OTD students their first professional skills course, which within our curriculum, and I'm responsible for teaching professional socialization, and the major topics in my course include teaching the basic tenets of OT, the basic responsibilities of OT, professional ethics, and guidelines and laws governing practice. I'm also tasked with teaching them to become aware of the OT professional organizations so that students understand the systems and those organizations both locally and nationally that advocate for politically for the healthcare laws that impact occupational therapy. So historically, what I've done is taught that kind of just a brief overview that healthcare is inherently political within our country, and that I highlight the positive benefits of those professional organizations and political action groups until last year. I had kind of students that struggled with three distinctive political and social scenarios that challenged their views of them both personally and professionally. And so I'll touch just very briefly on those right now. So I had three students who came to me separately looking for guidance on how to grapple with these kind of personal and professional conflicts. After one particular person, after learning about sort of ethical requirements of OTs and thinking about their personal preferences regarding their faith, came to me to discuss some sort of conflicts that she was having. We also took the first year cohort to OT Day at the Capitol here in Madison, and our state organization asked us as members to advocate for privatizing the licensure process in the state of Wisconsin. And then we also had a scenario nationally at our national conference that highlighted some diversity and inclusion tensions, and that there were requests for protests and boycotting of certain events at our national conference. So those scenarios really got me thinking, and had this sort of realization that I don't necessarily provide space within my course to sort of grapple with the middle of this diagram. So sort of understanding this overlap between our personal and professional identities, and how do we sort of manage conflict when that arises. So fortunately, while I was sort of grappling with all of this and thinking about what I should do, I learned about the microgrant opportunity and knew this was a really great way to get explore my question and project outcomes, which I have here on this slide. So my question is, what are effective learning activities designed to help students navigate both personally and professionally the social and political environments for which they will participate? And then I had three outcomes that I really wanted to focus on. So increasing awareness of the educational and legislative value of our professional organizations within OT. I wanted them to gain an awareness that the personal and professional organization and their personal values can conflict with the professional and organizations that we have, and that I wanted them to increase awareness of tools and skills used to sort of navigate those scenarios and systems. So what did I do to help answer these questions and address these project outcomes? This really was a team process through the microgrant opportunity, and my team, along with our Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Sam Becker, were instrumental in sort of developing these steps that I have laid out here on this slide. So all students first started off by taking a modified value living questionnaire that was developed back in 2002, and it measures important aspects of psychological well-being. And it really was used within this module as a way to serve as like a self-reflection tool. And we added a couple additional items onto this survey to encourage students to think about their political views, since OT is inherently situated in policy and political aspects in our country. And then we also added art-based and creativity question, which is not highlighted in the original survey. So all students took that as a way of just sort of starting to self-reflect. I kept content from previous years that I'm required to include about professional organizations, and I brought in a guest from our Wisconsin OT Association for that. And again, that was consistent based on our standards and things that I've taught before. What was new is bringing in the idea of having the students understand the appreciative inquiry model. So this was a tool that could help students navigate these personal and professional conflicts. So Sam Becker came as a guest and talked about this particular model. It's a strength-based model, collective learning approach to change within organizations and other human systems. So it's not typically used to address personal and professional tensions within healthcare education. And so that was part of wanting to gather some data from what the students took out of this module, because this is sort of an innovative approach and a different model than is typically used to sort of think through these sort of situations. So once the students learned about the appreciative inquiry model, they were able to apply it. I created, with the students who had came to me last year about the OT Advocacy Day at our Capitol, we created a kind of social/political tension case study for students to work through using the appreciative inquiry. And the outcome measures that I used were anonymous open-ended questions, post-module reflections that included asking the students how this week's content and activities impacted their thinking as they start their journey as OT professionals. I asked them what resonated with you as you consider the intersection of your personal identity and your professional identities. And then also asked, how might this week's content and activities influence your future professional experiences? And I have the results here on this slide. So I had 23 students answer these 3 open-ended questions. Excuse me. And we took all those responses and did a content analysis along with my liaison, Darian Drake. We coded them separately, came together for consensus, and you can kind of see where the outcomes sort of fell. So results really fell into 3 buckets that were directly related to the module's outcomes. So 31, or almost 32% of the responses included themes from Objective 1. And you can read the quote there. I learned how important and relevant these professional and state OT organizations are. We always have to advocate and make sure that our voices are heard and respected. About 50% of the responses fell into my outcome 2, really thinking about how people didn't have an idea of how frequently your personal and professional values would intersect and challenge one another, and that they need to be prepared to encounter these dilemmas. 27% fell in the third objective. So that was sort of gathering new skills, to kind of navigate these tensions. I highlighted the quote at the top. I will have a heightened awareness of how my personal and professional identities are in constant overlap. And that really hit home for me because I think it really provided evidence that what I proposed landed with the students. I wasn't sure how students were going to take using that appreciative inquiry. So I was fairly happy with the results that I got from this year. So what I'm going to do next is take a drink of water since I'm really dry. This year's focus was really on action research to help me improve my teaching practices. So next year I'm going to run this again with some minor modifications just to help make more links between ethics and the content from this particular module. And then I'm working with my liaison to go through the IRB process and looking at submitting in an OT journal that's directly related to education, just because there isn't a lot of research on this topic within OT education. And that is it for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, presenters, all of you, and thank you all for listening to our journey. We're interested in hearing what questions you have. I'm actually not seeing the chat. Maybe I can get out of the slides so we can. Is there anything we haven't addressed? No. You've heard a few names along the way. We don't have a slide up here that gives everybody credit. This has very much been a team effort with a whole lot of people across multiple divisions. So Darian Drake and Chris Leyland and Dan Vokes, I think, have been on this, and Kim Arnold, Sid Freitag, some of the folks that are in, that have been participating in LAP have been instrumental in this program, along with many others. Amber Gray and Mary Thompson, just Chad Shorter, Shannon Harris. We've had so many people contributing and really have appreciated all their help. We'd love to hear some questions or hear your thoughts about, is there a type of data that you would think about for investigating, or are you doing anything at your institution?
Is it okay if people jump on mic?
Please, absolutely. Please.
Yeah, Sarah, Stefano here. This is super interesting and very nice work. We had a Learning Analytic Fellows program with microgrants here at Indiana University, and was fairly successful and achieved more engagement from faculty with data related to students and their experience, and I think it built capacity and data literacy, awareness of what's available, but also the power that can come with engaging analytically with how students learning their courses, what issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion that they might be experiencing and contending with. So it's a very nice work.
Thank you, Stefano. And we actually, we talked with your institution and folks there to find out about your program before we launched ours, along with a few other institutions. So yes, we appreciated the work that you all did earlier. Yeah, Sarah has something to say. Please.
I think kind of a secondary kind of benefit that came from participating in this is having the students. I really enfolded the students that were having the conflicts into giving me feedback on what would be helpful to present to the next group of students as well. And then I think that helps students understand that we're responsive to their needs and think critically about the things that they bring to us. So I think that is, that's not going to show up in any of my data, but I think when you're talking about benefits of doing something like that and including the students, I think was really helpful. And then I think it also helps sort of preview for our doctoral students who will be doing a similar project like this for their capstone project, right? Gathering data, asking questions, that sort of thing. I think it is also helpful to preview that and to have students participate in that process of gathering data and seeing what outcomes that I got from their feedback. And so I will share this. I have a poster of this presentation too, like I will be sharing that with them as well so that they can see sort of for full circle what it's like to provide data and then what happens on our end when we use that data to help make curricular decisions. So it's just a secondary benefit that I've seen from participating in something like this.
Thank you, Sarah. Sure. Yes. Other thoughts? Other of you? Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciated that some of these projects, you put out front the expected outcomes. Like Sarah's, yours was great, and I loved that slide, and that was fantastic. And actually was thinking about that. I think it was in Andrea and Amanda's presentation about PharmD students and looking at the reflections. And I was going to put it in chat, but I'm not even sure if I was wording it as best I could. But I was wondering about for that project, are there outcomes for how those students should be having those interactions, right? Like what they should be learning in those interactions or be able to show in their reflections. Because I thought it was really interesting how you compiled some analysis of them, but I'm wondering what should they be getting right from that experience?
Thanks for asking that question, Andrew. I appreciate it. And I think one of the pieces that is different is that these are in pharmacy practice settings and they're not in a classroom setting. And so we can't always guarantee what the students are going to experience. We don't know what patients are going to show up that day or also the experiences of that preceptor beforehand. And so a lot of it is out of our control, which is, as educators, is really hard because you don't always know what they're going to expect. And so I think that is something that we have to be aware when we're designing it, just because it is experiential learning and that where we have built this in. For our students, they have many experiences throughout their entire curriculum. So this isn't just a standalone experience. And so we recognize that some students are going to get it at different times. Also, different students come in with different experiences. So some have worked as a pharmacy technician and as a job for many years before they've even done this. Whereas this is the first time they're setting foot in a pharmacy potentially. And so I think that is another piece, is that students bring a lot may bring a lot of experiences with them or not. And we also have to design these experiences regardless of what that background is. So I don't know if that provides a little bit of context. I don't know if it answers your question directly, but I think it is a lot that we need to take into consideration, especially when we're doing experiential learning.
I think the bare minimum, to like piggyback off of Andrea a little bit, but one quantitative thing is, did they accurately identify at least one HHS population that they either saw or discussed with their preceptor, right? And I maybe alluded to this, but we've had an ongoing initiative. It's taken us years to build this data set and the infrastructure for it, which is, I think, part of how we ended up in this program in the first place, that, again, we know the population at those sites. And so one of the things we want to do is join these qualitative pieces to that quantitative, what site were they at, what data, what types of populations should they have seen. And if it's those sites that are not particularly diverse, and those are the sites where the students can't identify a population, well, then this is really working, right? And they're required to do at least one that meets our criteria for a medically underserved, a site that serves medically underserved patients. So there's more to come. And like Andrea was saying, this is like the first year seeing a snippet of the whole big thing we're working on here.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you. I almost forgot that this is experiential learning and you don't have control over exactly what's going to happen. So it's a really good point to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting in healthcare education. I mean, we have the standards from, right, our accrediting bodies that there are, right, some very concrete things that we need to teach and like in OT too. We can't attach any of those, a lot of those really concrete standards to their experiential. Like we have to get that to them all before they go out on their experiential experiences. But I have a little more control in mind because it was in the classroom. But I'm really... our learning standards are put everywhere, right? So the way that my course is designed, they have a course overview page. The our accrediting body standards are right there, and then we of course have the liberty of adding our own. And so I added the ones that I wanted to add for this particular module as well. So it's kind of my 2 cents about it from the OT world.
Krista, did you have some?
No, I was
Yeah,
noticing
jump in.
there's a question in the chat here too. Did anybody else have anything from the previous question? So Thomas James asked a good question. And I'm going to restate your question, Thomas, and share my interpretation and certainly clarify or others chime in here. But Thomas asked, what's your opinion on taking the students' text data from their reviews, from their reflections of these, regardless of whether it's a clinical rotation reflection or a open-ended student survey reflection? I'm guessing that's what you're referring to, Thomas. What's your take on putting that in a AI chatbot, essentially? And this is my interpretation of your question. What's my opinion or our opinion on using an AI tool to summarize, to perform that qualitative assessment of those student reflections, and then allow course improvements based on the AI qualitative analysis, essentially? So that's a loaded question. First of all, please chime in and clarify if I'm not interpreting that question correctly. This is from other projects. Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Something I could add to that. You're saying have the AI do a reflection and give responses. I was thinking more along the lines of creating the reflection for the AI through prompt engineering. And then prompt engineering, you can go as extensively as you want to, personalize as you want to, use as many resources as you want to. So that provides more imagination as to how you can use that to then develop a personalized bot to whatever extent you want to. And I guess it's going to be dependent on how much you think the students could need extra ideas or could benefit from a personalized chatbot.
So let me ask a clarifying question then back at you, Thomas. So are you saying use the chatbot to create a personalized reflection that the student then answers? So the chatbot's developing the questions, not necessarily analyzing the responses to their reflections?
When the chatbot develops questions and hears responses, it will analyze more. The initial familiarity of the data the chatbot will use to ask personalized questions comes from the prompt engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my initial thought is, personally, I haven't used an AI chatbot in that form, in that way. I think that's really interesting. I think that is, especially for my classes where I have 150 or 200 students, that's really interesting. But my first hesitation is to have consent and student privacy of that data and those discussions and where that information is being shared and stored and distributed. So I wouldn't personally be comfortable with that implementation at this point, and am not doing it in any of my classes.
You're thinking more along the lines of collecting data from the whole classroom. I was thinking more along just collecting the data, text data from the surveys the students already voluntarily gave you.
Yeah. And then using, so certainly that is something I've thought about too, but even, and I've seen some ways to also give consent for that. But one of the question, or at some point in that discussion, we'd have to make sure we had student consent. Yeah, extra consent. So that would be an extra step. And certainly allowing students to opt out if they weren't comfortable with that. And I think there could be a time and a place to try it. I think this is me speaking for Sarah's project, but some of these questions might have more personal reflections and responses and reflections or responses that in some ways are de-identifying too when you're sharing data with your preceptors or whatnot. So there, and when we're talking about DEIB, there certainly are some sensitive topics we have to be careful with when we're talking about or referencing student data, but it's an interesting idea, but I would be a little bit hesitant to start to pull in my students in a project like that or a tool like that at this point.
Totally understandable.
Yeah.
Thank you for your input.
Yeah.
Other thoughts in the room here? So we are almost at time. I'm also going to tell you that we are, and I didn't announce this early, and we're having a watch party for Lab 24. So we were kind of excited about that. And I decided that we should come to our old traditional, the first union, which is Memorial Union. It's right on the lake. So I was thinking I would draw people in because then we can go down on the terrace and have ice cream or maybe something else afterwards. But I forgot that an old building is not going to have very good like power. Like there's not power strips everywhere. So it's been an interesting journey this afternoon trying to find even just power to plug in our laptops. And we appreciate you all being patient with us as we were kind of getting organized to begin with. So thank you for listening to our story.